Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We seem to be running a little bit behind today. We will catch up, though. I'd like to go ahead and reopen the Transportation Commission meeting, and we have now a discussion on the Oregon Department of Transportation Strategic Business Plan and that process, roles, responsibilities, governance, and the like. So welcome, both of you. I'll go ahead and please, Director,
while Mr. Pandy and Ms. Bruce get settled there, I just want to remind the Commission that with this item, we have 3 topics that we wish to engage. I think the first is Ms. Bruce will speak to the strategic business plan, the process to date. So she'll give us the status of that. We turn to Mr. Pandy to speak to the baseline assessment and the work plan regarding the management review recommendations, with a focus specific on roles, responsibility, and governance. And what it is kind of a twofold conversation. Again, it is that baseline. Here's kind of the diagnosis, prognosis to date. And one of those items is that issue of governance, roles and responsibilities. You'll recall that that was DAS recommendation number 1 for all intents and purposes. And what we want this to be is really somewhat of a verbal thought discussion or paper or something along those lines, because we're really prepping for the October workshop where Mr. Pandy will facilitate the conversation specific to the roles and responsibility. And then, as we have every month, we will ask the Commission to accept the Management Review monthly progress report. So with that, 3 items, I turn it over to Ms. Bruce to kick this off.
Thank you, Director. Good afternoon, Chair Boehne and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Kelly Bruce. I'm with ODOT Strategic Business Services, and I'm the project manager for the Strategic Business Plan. So today is my pleasure to introduce Pete Pandy, who is our consultant partner in helping us put together the Strategic Business Plan. And as you'll recall, our first deliverable for this work was the baseline assessment of our current strategic planning processes. So Pete will be sharing with you the results of that assessment. Also, in that, you have the full report in your packet, which is attachment 2 to the memo. And we'll be just going through some of the highlights Pete will share. Since the report, too, we've initiated the actual planning process itself. So we've had a lot of work accomplished in the last several weeks. And so I'll have Pete turn it over to him and let him kind of walk you through some of the highlights.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Boehne. Pleasure to be here and to see you all in person. For the record, Pete Pandy, President of Pivotal Resources. So we had an opportunity to talk to a lot of folks in ODOT and to gauge views around the idea of a strategic business plan, and so that's what I'll share first. The assessment was important to get a initial view of how people within the agency are viewing the idea of having a strategic business plan, and to help understand where some of the strengths and weaknesses are that we want to focus on in that plan. And the input that we got was very helpful, and as Kelly mentioned, we've already begun the work on actually sort of building out some focused priorities for the actual planning work. But the input that we got in the assessment was extremely helpful. I think one of the most important things that we were able to find was basically the attitude of the people in the agency. You could understand with the passage of House Bill 2017 that there would be a lot of concern about how are we going to handle building a strategic business plan in the middle of implementing the legislation. And the reality was, although there still was some of that concern, for the most part, the input, the feedback that we got from folks at all levels across the agency was this is going to be very helpful to us. ODOT is an agency that works hard to get a lot of things done, but there's an acknowledgement that maybe there's a need for more focus in order to put the energies on the things that are most productive and most useful to the agency. And so the things that we heard from people included we will have a clearer focus. We hope to have this through the process. We can make decisions more rapidly and transparently, which is certainly one of the things that came out in the McKinsey report. Clearer roles and responsibilities, and breaking down of silos in the organization. So those are some of the things that people felt were going to be important outcomes of not just the plan itself, obviously, but the process of developing the plan and then implementing it. The objective is not to have a document that looks nice, although we don't want a document that doesn't look nice, but really it's how it's used in helping make decisions, helping you instruct and guide ODOT, and the feedback, like I say, was very positive. Now, there's also concerns with an agency with a lot of stuff already on their plate. There is a bit of concern that this will yield a whole new list of things, which we're going to try to avoid. There's some concern that as an agency that tends to say yes, can we really change and be more disciplined and say no to some things, or maybe not now? The message from the plan has to be understood by everybody, and that some habits and culture change will have to take place. So those were pretty, I think, encouraging signs that the process we're embarking on is going to be successful, and that people across the agency are ready to support it. But I mean, for many, it's still the proof will be in the pudding, as you might expect. This is just a quick overview of the process that we went through. It was a fairly rapid baseline assessment, took several weeks. We certainly based or used the McKinsey report and the DAS recommendations to help provide input as well as the work that myself and my colleagues have done with ODOT. We got a broad population, and you can see in the purple center there kind of the various things that we used. We had 4 focus groups, total of about, what was it, 60?
130 or 140.
Yeah, and anyway, in the focus groups, I think it was a little over 40 people. We had 95% of the people show up. You know, when you set a meeting and say, please be here for a focus group, a lot of times you expect you're going to get maybe 2/3 of the people if you're lucky, but we had almost no-shows in that. So it just showed the level of interest and participation in that focus group process. And then we basically, from that process, built a set of recommendations. The detail is both in an executive summary and more detail in the full document that you've received. But these are the 3 main areas that we felt emerged from the report or from the assessment. One is the area of governance and priorities, and basically both the structure, if you will, and the process of communicating decisions and having a more cohesive governance process within the agency so that decisions are made and communicated more effectively across the agency, and also so priorities are set with a little more discipline. So that's kind of where the saying not now or maybe something else right now because we need to really focus on what's critical. And that all these things kind of tie in. Culture and engagement, some of that is kind of balancing being able to move quickly when the opportunity is right, but also the knowing when to slow down. Sometimes there's a tendency to rush to solutions. Sometimes there's a tendency to go slow. And so helping the culture and the people's attitudes better focus on, what's the right pace. And there were a variety of business issues and opportunities. We did not at this stage do a detailed review of all the projects that are underway in the agency and try to cull that out. That work will probably happen after the strategic plan is finished at the end of the year. But what we did identify were some critical strategic issues. For example, the workforce needs of the agency was a big issue, both short-term as relates to House Bill 2017, but as well the longer term, what is the ODOT of the future, and how will decisions that are made today in terms of people, talent, retention impact the future more long range of the agency. Also in that, there was an emphasis, we felt a need emerged to continue to be proactive in working with external stakeholders so that the broader population, and particularly the political areas of state government, understand some of the challenges and implications on the transportation system so that you and the agency can make the best decisions and not at times be guided toward priorities that may be not in the best interest of the transportation system. Obviously, that's important to you. So I'll stop there. Any questions? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the report, but don't want to just ramble on.
Say the general observation was that it was a lot that I'd been hearing as well, and I think it's a great way for us to be able to, we should have a strategic business plan, and I believe that it will strengthen our work. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to coalesce all those thoughts and move forward. So there wasn't anything that was highlighted that I kind of found as just, wow, I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah.
So I think, folks, there are some themes, and that helps us in being able to go forward.
Good.
Please.
Did you hear anything surprising?
You know, I'd have to say, I mean, we've worked with ODOT for 5 years and have had a lot of opportunity to learn about the agency. Probably nothing super surprising,
Okay.
I would have to say. It was pretty in line with, you know, we tried to go in with an open mind, and we brought in people who had not worked with ODOT before because we wanted to make sure that, you know, we had fresh eyes and ears. But it was pretty much what we expected, but you know, certainly the themes, we didn't know what themes would come out, so we didn't come in with preconceived notions on those.
And I would just add, I think I was a little surprised at how supportive everybody was. So I thought maybe we would see more skepticism, but I think the overall people are ready for this. They're ready to engage in it, and they're looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that probably was a surprise to see the level of readiness and acceptance of this is going to be a good thing for the agency. Very little on we're doing this just because DAS told us to.
Right.
And I think that's due in part to Director Garrett's messaging about this, that this is something that is an opportunity for the agency, not a command performance kind of thing. So I think that's going to be important. I reflected a little bit on, you know, we helped DMV about 1.5 years ago create their strategic plan, just as they were starting the strategic transformation program. And there's something about when you're doing a strategic plan in the midst of something as big as the House Bill 2017 that kind of sharpens the senses, right? It's sort of like, you know, we really need to figure out what we're all about if we're going to carry out all the challenges in that bill. So, you know, I did expect to hear more, are you kidding me kind of thing, but we did not hear nearly as much of that as you might have expected. So it was good. So looking ahead, we are now basically going through the steps that you'll see in this flow chart. We're actually involved in the box there, which we actually have done that first piece of work, which is key areas for the deeper dive review. So we have a leadership task force, a diverse group across the entire agency that met twice last week and worked on developing ideas of specific focus, and I'll share those in a minute. Now we're moving into the phase of forming some cross-agency working groups to tackle specific topics that were identified by the task force, as well as another team that's going to work on evaluating the vision and values of the agency. I think that's going to be something that you'll be very interested in, and ideally will also reflect to some degree the Commission's vision as well. So stay tuned for that. Those working groups will be doing, as it says, a deeper dive review into the topics. I'll share those in a second. And then that will be going back to the Leadership Task Force, and it's their guidance and decisions that will end up being in the plan, but we'll be doing stakeholder feedback prior to the completion of the plan. The time frame of 5 years will obviously help focus and make sure that the execution of House Bill 2017 is, you know, carefully thought through. It's not going to be, let's build a strategic plan and ignore what we have to do in the short term around the House Bill implementation.
Could we go through just briefly examples of external and internal? So external stakeholders, so we have an idea of kind of how broad we would go or how broad we might not go?
Well, we have to kind of leave I have to kind of leave that up to folks in the agency to make those
Okay.
decisions. And, you
Okay.
know, certainly as we go forward, we'll look to you,
Great.
to the commission, to provide input as well. We have a short time frame, so we really will be looking more, I think, for, you know, any major concerns or any, you know, rather than detailed feedback. But the plan is not going to be a super detailed plan either. It's going to be a high-level guide. So hopefully, you know, it will be not something that people are going to feel like they have to shoot holes in. I can't guarantee that.
It should marry up well with our goals and key performance
Absolutely.
measures and all the different things that we're tracking within the agency as well.
Yes.
So, okay.
But I think it will provide a guide to helping define some of what those key performance measures will be. Because working and putting more emphasis on developing the measures, developing the implementation plan is the work that we'll take on after the plan is built. So the plan provides a high-level map, and then, you know, the fine-tuning and details come after based on what the broad direction that's set in the plan. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And we're also currently, part of the work that we're working on right now is to identify what does that stakeholder feedback look like. You know, we have a list of folks that were involved in the McKenzie review. Do we want to go back out to those same folks? You know, so that is part of the work that we're currently involved in. And we'll, like Pete said, we'll be looking to the commission for guidance there.
So this is the overall structure of building the plan. It basically follows the process that I showed a second ago. We have the sponsor committee, which is Director Garrett, Chair Bainey, and Deputy Director Brower. The leadership task force then includes the division administrators, but also a broad cross-section of other people at different levels. And then the working groups, we're actually going to have only 4, but we will have one working on the vision process, so I guess altogether is 5. And that will be drawing a broader cross-section of people from across the agency. And Director Garrett's made it very clear, we really want to look for people who aren't always involved in this kind of stuff, and people from different levels of the agency, and not, as we would call it, the usual suspects. The usual suspects, some will be there, but it's going to broaden the participation to make sure we hear maybe voices that aren't always heard in that process. So just to give you a quick summary, you know, part of a planning process is to set priorities. And so the work that was done last week was to identify what should the working groups focus on, and through a variety of discussions and team activities, et cetera, they came up with 4 broad areas: governance and accountability, which is about strengthening, as I mentioned before, governance structures, processes, prioritization methods, decisions and documentation, performance management. The whole topic of workforce, building a sustainable workforce, understanding the entire employee life cycle, the challenges of different generations of employees, preparing for the needs of the future. Third area was technology. Technology is a very broad one, looking both at how technology supports the agency, but also how technology is a product and service that ODOT provides. So we need to look at it from both perspectives. And then the fourth big one is strategic investment. Trying to better link and better guide decisions between your work, the budget, the STIP, and try to make sure that the whole process for making investments or making investment decisions is optimal and meets the needs of the state going forward. So they're big topics, but that was the intent, so that we can really encourage people to look at things in a new way and come up with priorities that, you know, at the end of the game, they may seem obvious, but it has to involve a pretty intensive soul-searching process. So those are the four main areas, along with the vision group that we mentioned that will be thinking about, you know, what is the vision of the agency going forward. So any other questions or comments on that? You'll be getting further updates, obviously, as we go forward. and would appreciate any feedback that you have.
I've given mine along the way. I think I'm looking at my colleagues here. Please.
Well, you heard me say this when we had the one-on-one interview, but I continue to have a concern about making sure that somehow this business plan helps everybody outside the agency, because inside, I think we recognize it, help people outside the agency recognize how much what we do
Yeah.
is ad hoc, is, the legislature saying, go do this, the governor saying, go do that, an emergency coming up, and obviously we want and need a good, solid business plan that sets priorities, but our priorities every day get upset, and there needs to be recognition of that, I think. Otherwise, we're either going to be stuck in a plan or we're going to be ignoring the plan.
Right. Well, I think definitely the intent of the plan is to not set things in stone so much that the agency isn't adaptable. And in fact, what we find sort of the paradox is that by having clearer priorities and more specific, rather than, we're going to be all things to all people, it enables an organization, it should enable ODOT to better respond, and also perhaps to better provide feedback when told, go chase that rabbit. Like, wait a minute, that's not one of the rabbits that we're supposed to be chasing. So ideally, it will have some value in communicating to external stakeholders, what we're trying to do and why we don't want to be diverted if it's not the best thing for the state. So, and obviously your role in supporting that is very important. But you're absolutely right. I believe it will help people better understand what's going on, the people who, pay attention.
Commissioner Brown, did you have a comment? Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, that was a great update. Then we will look forward to a much deeper dive in October as well.
Yes. Okay, so we'll shift gears a little bit and focus on the management review recommendation number 1 from DAS, which is around the OTC roles and responsibilities. That recommendation came to us prior to the passing of House Bill 2017. And as we know, 2017 actually provides some additional clarification that hadn't necessarily been there before. But we do still see there's opportunity, I think, to continue to evolve that and operationalize that language. So in agreement with Chair Boehne and Director Garrett and the Governor's Office, we have brought Pivotal Resources to facilitate a commission workshop at the October workshop next month. And the objectives for that will be aligning the commission members to a common and shared vision, so it ties in with the strategic business plan conversation as well. Understanding the roles and responsibilities and expectations in light of the new language with House Bill 2017, providing a path to educate and onboard new commissioners a little more effectively, clearly articulating the roles and responsibilities and authorities of the Commission, the Governor's Office, and ODOT, and how those 3 entities operate and engage, given, again, the new language in House Bill 2017. So just coming to a point of better clarity and understanding and shared vision around those things. So to prepare for that, Pivotal conducted another rapid assessment with various parties. He spoke with all of you and a few others, as well as the Governor's Office, to basically hone in on what really needs to be clarified now, where are the gaps in the information. So he'll provide a few highlights of that.
Okay. Hello again. I think for all of you have a pretty good sense of it, and I gather you also looked at the agenda, kind of a draft agenda at lunch, so I don't want to belabor that. The goal really is to strengthen the Commission's focus on policy and governance, and what's the right level that the Commission should be looking at. Obviously, it's not always at the same level, but what's the right elevation to be at in order to make the best use of your time. And, an event like the House bill almost invites looking under a lot of rocks. And so you want to be cautious. And so I think having that clarity about what's the right level to maintain in terms of focusing and guiding the agency is one of the things we want to have you talk about yourselves, right? To align between the commission, the agency, and the governor's office. How can we make sure that I described as the three legs of the stool are come all at the same length and are working well? And I think it's been a challenge because of the amount of turnover that's happened in the commission, and also going through the process of the legislation. There's an opportunity to kind of reestablish some operating principles and guidance, and maybe even thinking about future commissioners who come on. How are they going to figure out what's up, what's down? So I think that's another key area that we hope to work on. So that's kind of a nutshell, kind of the things that we hope to accomplish. I won't go through the agenda, but if you have any questions on it based on what you saw at lunch, obviously we can respond to those now.
So a quick question, I think I brought this up before, in addition to the three-legged stool, we have this other group, the Joint Transportation Committee. And I would very much like clarity on the intent and what's in House Bill 2017.
Okay.
Because either I'm not clear, or I don't want to be clear, one of the two. But I would like to know how that all fits in as well.
Good point, thanks.
Yeah, good, we'll make a note of that. And any other thoughts on that? You're looking forward to it?
Looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent.
Yes.
Good.
Thank
Are
you.
we?
Okay, so the last piece that we have then today is attachment 1, which is our monthly progress report on all of the management review recommendation items, and we're just seeking your acceptance of that report.
So if we feel ready, I'd welcome a motion. On the management review updates, but not all at once.
Move that we accept the presentation as presented with extra notes.
Okay, excellent. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Great, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work. Okay. Next, we have a presentation on ODOT Internal Audit Report on Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, and then also the request to accept the report as well. And Ms. Hardinger, am I turning it to you? Yeah. Okay, very good. The floor is yours.
We're back on. Great. Okay. Chair Boehne, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Marlene Hartinger, Chief Auditor for the department. With me today is Angela Crane, Office of Civil Rights Manager, and Joe Squire, State Materials and Construction Engineer. We're here today to share the results of the DBE audit as it relates to highway construction. I will start off with an overview of the audit and then turn it over to Angela and Joe for their management response. First, though, I would like to provide a brief overview of our internal audit office. We are a group of professional staff who provide an independent review of the department's programs. We conduct our work according with nationally recognized government auditing standards. These are the same standards that are used by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, Federal Office of Inspector Generals, and also the Secretary of State Audits Division. The goal of our audits is to provide information and make recommendations that management can use to improve their programs, to reduce costs, and to facilitate decision-making. We welcome the opportunity to share our work with the Commission through providing our reports on the consent calendar and through formal presentations such as today. In addition, not only do our auditing standards require that we share the results of our work with those charged with governance, engagement with the Commission on Internal Audits is also important for accountability and independence. Okay, I'll move into sharing the results of the audit. We looked at 3 areas within the DBE program as it relates to highway construction projects. The first is commercially useful function reviews. The second is prompt payments to subcontractors and contractors. The third is challenges in meeting the overall DBE participation goal. Okay, the first area with commercially useful function reviews. DBEs must perform a commercially useful function, which is performing, managing, and supervising the work in order to be counted towards the DBE participation goal. ODOT staff are responsible for conducting CUF reviews of the DBE firms on the project and documenting the results. As you can see by this slide, we've noted a notable improvement in the CUF report process over the last few years. Most reports we reviewed provide reasonable assurance that the DBE is performing a CUF. But we did identify a few areas that are recommended by the Federal Highway and the U.S. Office of Inspector Generals to add to the form to provide more assurance. These 3 areas include assessing company markings and emblems on the vehicles, third-party operations of leased equipment, and materials management activities. And we made recommendations to include those on the forms going forward. The second area we looked at was prompt payments. Federal DBE regulations consider contractor payments to subcontractors prompt if they are made within 30 days. Oregon has an additional requirement. The standard for Oregon's threshold is 10 days for prompt payments. This applies across all subcontractors and contractors, not necessarily just DBEs. In looking at payments, we found that ODOT made payments timely to prime contractors. All progress payments and release of retainage that we tested complied with the prompt payment requirements. However, we did find delays in looking at the prime contractors' payments to subcontractors. Most payments complied with the federal 30-day payment requirement, although we did find that 8% were extended beyond that time frame. The delay grew to 44% when looking at the state 10-day payment threshold. State law also requires, if a payment is to be late, that the prime notify the sub in writing as to why. When we looked in the files, we did not find that notification to explain the reason for the delay. Additionally, we noted that ODOT did not verify the accuracy of payment information that the prime contractors provided. Okay. The second area, or excuse me, the last area was looking at DBE participation challenges, and we covered a few things in this area. The first we noted was difference between available and certified DBEs. A recent study found that less than 50% of potential willing and able DBE firms are actually certified as DBEs. The second is variability in the certification status. Not all DBEs who become certified actually stay certified, so there's movement in and out of that program. In addition, there's a time lag between setting the DBE contract goal and the eventual payments to the firm. And for ODOT to know the actual goal earlier would help with our goal-setting strategies. Lastly, we have other matters. Auditors tend to have a few of those when we are out looking around. So in this case, we noted 3 areas. One is paid summary reports. We noted that contractors frequently submitted these late, and so that made it challenging for us to, as ODOT, to provide timely monitoring of the payment information. We also noted that ODOT had established a new goal to release retainage earlier. However, delays in reaching the approved stage on bid items also impacted the ability to release the retainage as early as they could. And lastly, ODOT's DBE program plan was using total federal aid dollars to establish the DBE participation goal when federal requirements are that we use contract dollars. And so as a preview to the management's response, we understand that this calculation has already been corrected to the right amount for the contract dollars. So with that, that was a high-level overview, but I would like to turn it over now to Angela and Joe for their management response.
I have a quick question, and whoever would be best suited. So help me with understanding, if we want to expand business in Oregon, this program needs to work. So, and we need to make sure that there are opportunities for businesses in Oregon to grow and expand. So, certification for DBE, are we going, what does that take? Like, is that, and then bumping in and out of that certification process in terms of, is that what seems to be happening there?
Chair Boehne, Angela Crane with the Office of Civil Rights.
Yes.
As you may or may not be aware, COBID, Certification Office of Business Inclusion and Diversity, is the actual certification agency under Business Oregon that provides certification. So there is a process that a firm would go through to, as far as dollar values, years in business, who's controlling the ownership to actually get certified. So it's a business choice on the types of certification that they choose to seek out, and then working with COBID in order to get certified. As far as in and out, that's something that we have seen through the disparity studies and the waivers, and when the DB goals are open to all the certification types versus very limited, such as, African American, Subcontinent Asian. If a firm, for example, was not one of those groups, they were, what's the benefit to me? Why stay certified?
Okay.
There's a recertification process. That means opening up the books. That means showing, the agency, all the checks and balances. Some firms take that as personal information.
yeah.
It's a process. So again, it's about weighing their personal benefit to being certified.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, for the record, I'm Angela Crane, Manager for ODOT's Office of Civil Rights. So I'm going to step back for a moment to the 2016 DB Disparity Study, as many of the agency's next steps or action items go hand in hand with this audit. The Disparity Study assists ODOT in setting the overall annual DBE goals for the 2017-2019, evaluating if we can attain the overall goal with race-neutral means or if we need race-conscious measures, and to determine if we need DBE contract goals. So prior to the disparity study, we were falling short in meeting our goal of 13.1%. Actual achieved was 9.4%. We reported our shortfall to Federal Highway, and reasons for differences between the overall goal and awards and commitments were as follows: a statewide DBE goal that was too high due to the waiver, difficulties in reporting A&E award data, overall low DBE subcontractor participation rate, and DBE work was limited to the traffic control and trucking. The disparity study helped us provide strong evidence that we would benefit from allowing all DBEs to participate in the program, resulting in a rescission of that waiver. The 2017-2019 annual goal is at 11.6%, and as of July 31st of 2017, we're at 12.33 achieved. The disparity study, audits, and general feedback have allowed us to create and focus on some guiding objectives: increase awareness of the DBE and small contracting programs, including support services resources, meet Federal Highway requirements, including responsiveness to the disparity study, clarify policy and practices to streamline and support DBE utilization, and increase capacity of DBE firms, and increase utilization of small contracting programs. The following are actions either underway or under consideration: that we continue to monitor and examine the goal-setting practices and methodologies, expand data tracking capabilities, the Office of Civil Rights and COBID, the certifying agency, be present at stakeholder and outreach events such as OWAMI's trade shows, chambers, career fairs, groups such as NAMACs, PBDGs, I'm going to throw out a few acronyms here, and Governor's Marketplace. Educational opportunities for firms such as small business management courses, mentor protege, and access to capital. Assist with exposure of DBEs to prime contractors. Streamline and automate DBE program processes to ease administrative burden for primes, contract administrators, and DBEs. Develop certification messages towards non-certified or previously certified firms that offer a value proposition on why and how the ODOT DBE program can help support and grow their firm and expand capacity. Targeted efforts to utilize the DBE or potential DBE contracting community in Oregon's rural markets, proactively analyze projects in sufficient time for prime contractors and subcontractors to begin to develop necessary working relationships in preparation for DBE opportunities, and improve coordination to tie contractor networking and outreach events to upcoming projects. For example, partnering with SBDCs to offer additional statewide education and networking opportunities. Reconvene the Workforce and Small Business Advisory Committee per the disparity study recommendations. Disseminate information through an electronic newsletter. Enhance the reputation of small business contractors across the agency and the contracting community by identifying and sharing DBE and small business success stories. Use the department's small contracting program to increase DBE involvement by race-neutral means and pursue statutory changes to expand program contract limits. Explore implementing a pilot DBE set-aside program, such as the one administered by the Florida DOT. We are currently meeting with the City of Portland to learn more about their prime contractor development program and are seeking federal highway input and support. Consider inserting language in RFPs asking bidders about their DBE strategies and history of supplier diversity. CUF action plans as they relate to this audit. We agree with recommendation 1 to continue working to improve the completion rate, timeliness, and completion of CUF reports and supporting documentation. We also agree with recommendation 2 to review the federal highway tips on evaluating a CUF and include added value to the CUF review form. Additionally, to provide training to project managers, inspectors, and field coordinators on any of these updates. The specifics on the action plans is that we have reviewed the tips for evaluating a CUF. Forms will be amended to add a follow-up needed checkbox or a field and a follow-up conducted narrative field for the entry of follow-up details and results. Our database is able to capture the number of CUFs being completed and the timeliness of the entries to assist us with the QA and performance measurements. Paid summary reports, or PSRs. We agree with the recommendation 3 that PSRs remain a critical tool in monitoring prompt payment or reporting on DB participation. Take steps to ensure that the PSRs are complete, accurate on their face, submitted timely in accordance with the contract and other governing guidance, and any notifications required under statute. The implementation of the contractor's electronic exchange system and AASHTO-aware construction and materials module, along with civil rights and labor modules, should perform a robust monitoring process with respect to prompt payments, along other related items. Additional actions: it has been recognized that current language on the forms and the instructions that accompany the forms could be better clarified. Efforts are being made to improve these forms. It will also be crucial to educate and train the end users on the forms as well as the new systems that we put in place. Future database systems will assist us with the monitoring timeliness and the completion of any PSRs and help identify areas of improvement. To address the additional management response, we understand the recommendations and the reasons behind payments and verification of these payments. We partially agree with these recommendations. Due to there being no ODOT contractual relationship with a project subcontractor, suppliers, and sub-service providers, ODOT must necessarily be cautious with an approach for recommendations 4 and 5. We will seek the advice of DOJ to assess potential processes that avoid potential infringement on the contractual relationship between a prime and its subs. We agree with the recommendation 6 to continue to work with COBID to conduct a targeted outreach and recruitment effort towards firms identified as potential DBEs in the 2016 disparity study, and use the results to inform the annual DBE participation goal and our meeting with COBID monthly and quarterly to discuss strategies and partnering at events throughout the state that will continue education and recruitment for these DBEs. We agree with recommendation 7 to continue to explore whether changes to release of retainage processes can better meet ODOT's intended objectives, and process evaluation will be conducted to assess a baseline following the 2017 construction season. The contract administration engineer's office will modify current retainage processes based on the evaluation results if warranted. And lastly, we agreed with recommendation number 8 and modified the DB plan to clarify that the overall goal set in accordance with 49 CFR 2651 applies only to contractor payments and not to all the federal aid funds expended. So I pass the remaining time to Joe Squire. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown?
Real quick, Joe, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I didn't recognize you this morning, and now I remember. One of the things, Marlene, I think we talked about during the audit committee itself, on the recommendations as far as payments to subcontractors, is ensuring that in our contracts, that the contractors state that a prime must pay the subcontractors, because that was one thing that I don't recall clear, and maybe Joe looks like he's gonna answer that, so. But I realize that's part of the recommendation to go to DOJ and get that approval, but we don't monitor subs, we monitor primes. And so it's kind of, that line is fuzzy, and Joe's gonna answer as soon as his red light's on.
I think you teed him up.
Commissioner Brown, Chair Boehne. If I understand the question correctly, it's what contractual terms do our prime contractors place on their subs and obligate each other to. And what we do require is that all terms and conditions of our base contract or the prime contractor flow to the subcontractor. In addition, and I actually have an example of a subcontract with me in anticipation of a question like this, is that they also have to provide that you will comply with prevailing wage rates to your employees, and that there'll be payment if you're a sub-tier, a first-tier subcontractor, that you'll pay your sub-tier contractor, your second tier, in other words, within that 10-day period. So if you're the sub-tier, you get paid 20 days later, according to Oregon statute. So those are all passed through directly from the prime contractor, right from ODOT, all the way down to whatever vendor, supplier, subcontractor, whatever tier they may be. Does that address your question? Thank you. Oh, I get to speak, I'm sorry. Chair Boehne, Commissioners. My name is Joe Squire. For the record, I am the State Construction Materials Engineer. And I'm going to speak specifically about prompt payment. One of the things that we discussed with Marlene's audit group was common reasons for delay. They wanted to gain an understanding, why was it 44%? On the state statute of 10 days of delayed. So we reached out to our Oregon Industry Leadership Team, which consists of about 7 or 8 prime contractors in the state. That's a group that Director Garrett and Highway Deputy Director Paul Mather participate in. Largely, these were the responses. I pulled them individually of each other and saw some common threads. But I can tell you, I won't read all these things, but one of the primary issues are BOLI issues that we see. And a BOLI issue, of course, is Bureau of Labor and Standards in Industry, and it's when a subcontractor, it doesn't matter to me whether they're DBE, non-DBE, or they're just a subcontractor, does not pay their employees either completely or partially or not at all with the provisions of the prevailing wage. We have numerous examples at times where a subcontractor, sometimes a contractor, won't pay their employee the prevailing wage rate. We have a recent case, for example, where they're paying approximately $18 an hour loaded rate, when in fact the prevailing wage is $34. The prime contractor and not the subcontractor becomes fully responsible for that discrepancy. And so BOLI goes after the prime contractor and charges them 100% of whatever was not paid, plus a 100% penalty, and that's reimbursed to the employee of the subcontractor. Meanwhile, the prime contractor may be out. And so that's one of the checks and balances that, as I move forward through my conversation today, I'll show you how we're trying to square that up to allow everybody in the world to see what's going on, and we're not in the paper avenue anymore. Another component that causes prompt payment issues and where subcontractors and sometimes prime contractors say, hey, we weren't paid properly or completely, is when we have a partial payment. So for example, if we drilled a sidewalk out that's $100 per linear foot, and the subcontractor does not get their billing invoice in time to the prime contractor to be submitted within the ODOT time periods, and those are all specified by contract, they may be delayed potentially an extra month in payment. That's part of the education process that Office of Civil Rights and even ODOT are trying to instruct and continue to instruct prime contractors, suppliers, vendors, and subcontractors at all levels. The other issue that we have too is recall that we bid on estimated quantities. So we may have an estimated quantity for a guardrail, for example, of 1,000 linear feet, when in fact we build 900 because of whatever geography or something came up a little bit different. Well, what we make sure of, especially if that's a DBE value that we assessed within the contract, that we account for the total dollars and maintain the DBE goal, but that DBE person may only see $900 or 900 linear feet of value paid to them. And so there's a concept that they're paid short. And so we're working through that educational process to make sure folks understand that we have estimated quantities and not firm, hard, committed quantities, other than in very specific situations. So what are we doing? You know, you can find all the excuses in the world for late pay or short pay or what have you. And we're working very diligently to become transparent. I once heard a federal highways person said that daylight is a great disinfectant. Well, transparency is a great disinfectant for where we're headed, I think. We've been working through a process change that I think I first described very high level when Tom Lauer was here last March with myself, and that was on some of the electronic exchange systems that we're working towards. On September 13th, we signed a contract with Infotech. They are the providers of a paperless contracting mechanism called Doc Express. You can view that as a file cabinet. I could teach each of you within 5 minutes how to operate this thing, put your documents into it, take a look at them. It has audit trails throughout them, so we're not chasing paper through, I have 15 project manager offices and 6 consultant project managers. I'm not chasing paper anymore. The big thing about this is that within that, we can set up individual file drawers. And in those drawers, we have separate documents. And so what you can see that's important on that is that email notifications. We will create a drawer that is specific for contractor payments. We also will have a specification that says that the contractor, that's the prime contractor, shall provide all subcontractors and anyone providing work or service under this access to that drawer. So it doesn't matter if you're the provider of the sheet steel that comes from Pennsylvania, or you're the mom and pop flagging outfit, or you're the concrete provider, or what have you, you have to have access to this. And that'll be published right inside of our standard specifications. What that means, if I can go back properly, is that you see that email notification. That means that if a document is posted to that drawer, no matter where I'm sitting in the world, as long as I have Wi-Fi or email access somehow, I'll get a little ping that says, Joe, you have a payment, or there's a payment document actually just posted here, and I can go see, did my payment from the month before, the week before just get posted? Great, it did. I'm expecting a check in the mail or electronically transferred to my bank account then from the prime contractor to myself. The other component about that, rather than having those documents sit in a box somewhere and our project managers, I can tell you we have hallways lined with boxes. And rather than sitting there, that can become a flagged item and we can say, hey, take a look at this. The page summary report is not there from the prime contractor. Now I'm calling the contractor as the project manager and say, where's your page summary report? Here it is, bing, I have it. There's no argument, I already sent it to you because I have one source of truth and one electronic trail. With that in hand, I can go right down the list and say, you paid subcontractor X, Y, and Z. What about subcontractor A? Well, they didn't turn in their quality and quantity documentation, and that's when I'll go to the point that Marlene made, where's the documentation to show me that so I can plug that in the file? Missing payroll report, missing quality and quantity documentation.
Well, just reporting requirements, the input, how long do I have as a prime to get that information in? Because it's only as good as the input.
The paid summary report, I believe, is due within 20 days of our payment to the prime contractor. So if I paid the prime contractor, and largely our contractors, I think 99.5% of them are electronic. So if I paid them on the 1st, on the 21st, I better see that paid summary report in my electronic mailbox.
And if you don't, is there some sort of a notification that, okay,
There is an automatic notification. We can flag that. We have a workflow process that makes it an automatic alarm bell goes off and phone calls start. Whereas right now, it's all up here or handwritten note on one of these things taped to my desktop, and we know how those go. The ink dries out. Within that payment drawer, I want to tell you there'll be 4 documents specifically that we've identified right now, and that's the page summary report. We will include the monthly payment report, and that's every single bid item on a job. So if there's 10 bid items, there'll be 10 items there, and if you're the contractor or subcontractor that did the street poles, you'll see street poles paid, or how much, or the percentage paid, and you should be able to tie to, hey, I have achieved 75% payment on that. Prime contractor, here's my check, you're late one day. And hopefully they have an electronic funds transfer, so it's there and they can make payrolls and whatnot. Likewise, related to the retainage, in some respects, I don't view that as any different as another paycheck. It's what I have to have in my hand, though, is all the quality and quantity documents in my hand, because if I don't, it can become federally non-participating for that one item, which means the whole project can become federally non-participating. And we don't want a $10,000 item to blow up into, hey, you're $1 million short now because we just pulled our funds out. And it has happened, not to ODOT, but, well, to a different ODOT. Oklahoma DOT experienced that unjoyful event. But the retainage will be shown, and we can also show in there what is lacking in the quality and quantity documentation. Largely, it's a mill certification, what have you, that sees the steel or the rock meets the specifications. This will roll out. Like I said, we did the contract on September 13th. We have a kickoff meeting with the vendor on the 2nd of October. We have an industry meeting on September 29th where we'll lay out a high-level schedule and fully expect to start pulling existing projects into this process sometime late December, early January. That's the goal we're looking for right now, and we seem to be on track so far. And with that, I have a note that says, thank you very much, Commissioners, and I'm going to hand this back to Marlene.
okay. And I think we may have some questions and comments as well, so,
Okay, do we want to proceed with questions and comments?
sure. Let's go forward. Do we have,
Yeah, I have one real fast.
okay?
First off, thank you. That was very helpful and informative and making me feel a lot better based on after reading the report, knowing that we actually have a strategic plan going forward of how to address some of these issues. I was curious, as related to these issues of prompt payment concerns that were identified in the report, what liabilities does the department have if this becomes an ongoing issue as it relates to the USDOT or Federal Highway?
Mm-hmm. I guess, Chair Boehne, Commissioner Simpson, ODOT is the prime recipient for the federal monies, and as such, we have a stewardship understanding that we are responsible. So I don't know, this would be perhaps a legal question to explore, but typically ODOT is responsible for the federal funds and ensuring they're spent appropriately, with the understanding, of course, there is a prime-sub relationship. So this may be a question that needs further discussion.
And I see Bonnie Heisch behind you nodding her head, so we would love to have an update on what is the exposure or liability at a future date, or if that could come back to us, that'd be great.
That would be helpful, because, I mean, in your report, you had identified that we're not fully complied with the prompt payment monitoring obligations. And so that just concerns me as a commissioner of the department, and the representative of the community, that I want to make sure that we're taking all necessary steps to not create any negative attention or any negative unintended results as a result of us not having things in line internally. But I'm very optimistic to see that this is rolling out, because one of my other questions was related to paperwork and how that has an effect in bogging down everybody, because I know that's a pretty common complaint across the board. So hopefully this will streamline a lot of those processes and concerns and enable us to get on the right path.
Commissioner Simpson, Chair Boehne, it absolutely will, and I know that there's been a number of firms, they've been bird-dogging Director Garrett and myself to no end as to get on board with this thing and get it going. And I can tell you, with a lot of help from folks upstairs in the IT group, with our Department of Justice and even our friends in DAS, we finally got through every firewall hurdle we could. And we're done with that process. And the good news for everybody, I hope, is that I own the calendar now. And so that's can be a good thing, and it can be a bad thing too. So, but we'll get there. Thank you.
Well, we will not be able to execute on House Bill 2017 if we do not have good streamlined reporting and contracting, and we have to. This is all coming together at the right time. Commissioner Lohman, and then I'll open it up to other comments too. Please.
I think Bonnie will tell us that the answer to your question, Commissioner Simpson, is big. Consequences are big if we don't. Can be anyway. If we don't comply fully. I was curious on the paperwork question. We heard earlier about streamlining the Connect Oregon application process. That one of the things they're doing is making sure that the application forms and submission tools can be all done online. Is that true for DBE certification and all the paperwork that the DBE firms have to submit?
Commissioner Lohman, Chair Boehne, while I cannot speak on behalf of COVID and Business Oregon on their system, they're currently using what's called a B2G system. And my understanding is they continuously improve those modules to go to paperless in all efforts. Today, I could certainly follow up on where they're at and what their plan is regarding 100% online and when that goal would be.
Yeah, I don't know how easy it is to evaluate whether it's at 90% or 95 or 100%, but I do. I know I have heard lots of concerns about that, and I think that's part of the reason for the variability issue. That it's just so much that pretty soon you kind of give up. So anything that we can do to help support Business Oregon in streamlining their process, I think can be significant in helping us meet our goals. The other thing I want to make sure I understand this. I had a question about the Ninth Circuit ruling in the Western States paving case back in 2005. And what I'm looking for is either corroboration or correction here. My understanding is they basically said, you got to show that there actually is a problem before you can set goals. And we've been able to get around that for a while with doing our disparity studies. And from that, we've been able to get a variance from the feds. But now that we have submitted all that we need to get full, I don't know what the right word is, full certification, I guess, from the feds, we don't have to do that anymore, and we can set the goals. Now, am I understanding that correctly? Probably need some clarification on details. But
Commissioner Lohman, Chair Boehne, while there's a lot of history that goes into the Western pavings. Overall, I would say yes. We are now at the point with our last disparity study that the hard goal setting is open to all the groups for DBEs. historically, through the disparity studies, we had to look at what groups were significantly underutilized. That's why we had the waiver for a number of years. But like I shared with the 2016 disparity study, it showed that yes, all the groups are underutilized. Therefore, as we move forward in our goal setting on a per project basis, it is open to all DBE full participation in order to fulfill those hard race conscious goals.
And so the result of that, if I understand correctly, is we should expect, as a result of being able to tell our prime contractors that they got goals to meet, we should be able to expect in the future better and better DBE participation.
Increased DBE participation, correct. So it's that balance. All the groups are available to meet the goals, getting more DBE certified so the pool is larger around the state, expanding capacity. So it's that balance of how many DBEs there are, but on the project per project or the variance side, being very specific in the goal setting for that project to then lend to the overall 11.6 in our current triennial goal. So we are striving to meet on an annual basis, and today we're at the 12.33, but then also on a triennial basis because it's a 3-year goal. We then look at doing a disparity study approximately every 5 years to do those checks and balances, look at each of the individual groups, where are they at, what's their rate of utilization, underutilized, overutilized, and then working with Federal Highway on hard goal participation.
Okay. It was nice to see that 12.33.
We are reporting monthly internally, just doing some checks and balances and just keeping a real close eye on where we're at with our goal and communicating that information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Other comments? Please.
Yeah, one last one. I was tying back to that technology, which I think is really interesting to me. And I know, as I've spoke with you, Angela, about the different, I guess, constituent partners that your office has, such as the Port and its mentor protege program. What organizations could you leverage in terms of providing some kind of educational assistance as companies are going through programs like that to be brought up to speed with some of the interfacing technology that the department is using in order to try to streamline that educational process as opposed to just jumping on the job and be like, how do I figure it out now? You know, being prepared for it when they've earned and been awarded the work, that they actually know how to use the software immediately.
I'll take that one. Commissioner Simpson, Chair Boehne. So the training regimen for this is, I can tell you, I first was introduced to the particular software vendor that we have by Iowa DOT. They currently have about 12 to 1,300 active contracts in it. And I said, can you sign me up? They said, send me your email address. And 5 minutes later, I was in. And it's an extremely intuitive program to begin with so far. And I don't view myself as a computer geek or nerd or what have you at all. In fact, I don't have much. I just had my first personal cell phone here just a year ago. And I'd rather not deal with them. But that said, I can tell you the training programs we're developing in-house are 2 hours intensive. We will go to contractors of all sizes, DBE, non-DBE, certain vendors or suppliers. We'll also have a suite, it's a user guide. Right now it's estimated to be about 60 or 70 pages long. It's mostly pictures. Click here, point there. If you can file a piece of paper in a file drawer, largely it's right there. There's certain actions that you have to take, whether it's accepted or submitted or what have you. So what I anticipate in order to leverage, I see ourselves going to various user groups, whether it's minority business owners or NAMAC Oregon or AGC groups or the Associated Petroleum, APAO, I usually call them by their acronym. That's the Pavement Asphalt Producers, or OCAPA, the concrete folks, and leveraging those types of meetings to do introductions. I can tell you industry's already seen bits and pieces of this at various levels, some small firms, but mostly the larger primes. What I do see, though, is that the folks will be on board with this as Angela's field crews that deal very directly with the DBE type vendors or the small business vendors. They'll be well versed in this as well as ourselves. And we will also have in-house folks to answer the questions. You won't be calling somebody back in Florida or Timbuktu to say, here's my problem. We want to know that the folks that are living and working the problems are sitting right next to us and not off in some distant state somewhere. As far as leveraging with other organizations right now, I'd like to get the training wheels off a little first. And so we're looking primarily at state STIP projects, not local programs first. We do see a couple of other entities around us that are looking at this Dock Express type product. But I think once it catches fire in a few places, like if we're dealing with City of Corvallis or what have you, they may take a look at adopting that themselves, or Port of Portland or what have you. I think contractors are going to demand it, and they might point to something that's fairly simple, and by the way, is no cost to the contractor. Yeah, that was on one of the slides. Unfortunately, the no is covered up by the white ODOT logo. So,
That darn logo.
Yeah.
That's an important word that we don't want to
no cost?
cut out. Yeah,
Yes,
no cost is a
no
good
cost.
cost. Yes.
They will have to buy their own computer or
Yeah.
cell phone or what have you, but it's a website service and no cost to the contractor.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for this update, and we do have a motion in front of us, which is if we feel so inclined to accept this report. And then also, what can we look forward to in terms of updates and tracking?
Chair Bainey, members of the commission. So with our internal audit reports, we follow up on all of them because the real value of an audit is realized in what happens because of the audit, like today's discussion. So we will be following up and staying in touch with the program to determine, actions taken, validate those actions, issue another audit report, and we can come back and present to you if that is desired.
Excellent. I think we would like to track that, and please go
And
ahead.
Madam Chair, with that, I would have the honor to move to approve the Oregon Department of Transportation's internal audit report on the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program.
Excellent. Do we have further discussion? All right. Please. And accept the report, yes.
And accept the report.
All right. Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much for the work.
Thank you.
It's an important part of Oregon business. All right, now we're going to move on to, and I think we can make up some time here, we're going to open a public hearing on the draft Oregon Freight Plan Amendment. The Oregon Transportation Commission will now conduct a public hearing on the draft Oregon Freight Plan Amendment. Public comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes each. Individuals providing similar testimony on the same topic are requested to appoint a spokesperson, and I see just the crowd goes wild. The commission has allocated 30 minutes for this public hearing, but we will hear all those who wish to testify. So go right ahead. Ms. Bohard, Mr. Turnoy, good to see you again.
Thanks for having us back. Scott Turnoy, Freight Planning Program Manager with ODOT. So we were here in July. You opened up the public review process, and we are here today to have the public hearing and close the public review process at the end of the day today. Just in summary, we did post the draft Oregon Freight Plan Amendment materials to the Freight Plan website, on ODOT's website. We sent out press releases, and we've gone and done presentations to various modal groups and other organizations who had an interest, and as well provided updates to the Oregon Freight Advisory Committee as appropriate. During the public review period, we've received a total of 4 comments, and you have 3 of the 4 in your packet. The 4th one came this week, is from FHWA, and we're working with our division office contacts here on the comment. It's related to the investment plan section of Chapter 9 in the draft materials, and feel very confident that we can work with our local contact at FHWA to resolve the comment. It was really just related to how much detail of what we expect to bring in from the National Highway Freight Program dollars annually, and how that would be applied to projects that we have listed in the investment plan already. And I would note that in July, we brought the draft table. We had a discussion about that at that meeting, and we have provided some updates that are now posted on the website to that table. And with that, I guess I would just make note that upon closure of the public review period and the hearing today, staff will take the feedback and the comments we've received, revise the draft materials, and then bring the revised version to the Oregon Freight Advisory Committee at their October 18th meeting, and then again back to this commission in November for final adoption.
Excellent. Do we have anyone that would like to approach the commission on this particular item? Okay.
They have 2 more hours. Just
They do, right, we're going to sit here for 2 hours, so I hope we can have, kidding. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will look forward to any feedback or comments from the other discussions that you will have, and then we will see you in November.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, before you go too far, I think we are going to have a conversation now about Connect Oregon, and Ms. Bohard, let me turn it over to you again. And commission members, in front of you, there should be revised language from this morning's discussion for us to, and it is one with a highlighted of 3 with a D at the bottom of the page, just making sure we're all on the same sheet of music. So please go right ahead.
So for the record, Jerry Bohard, TDD Division Administrator. So you should have some final last tuning to the question around the written demonstration of support. So we did provide the December 15th information in a couple of places throughout the rule, both within the pre-proposal and the plan itself, the recognition around wanting documentation of support for the funding. In the case of the pre-proposal, showing a letter of interest from the relative rail entity, and then letters of support, or plural or singular support, from local businesses, jurisdictions, or organizations. And then we also, just to try to address, at least at this point, knowing that we have to do some more work in the permanent rule, identified the January 1, 2020 date as, in essence, when they begin construction, no later than when they begin construction. So to get at their a need to sort of close the timeline, shall we say. And we do recognize that in the permanent rule we have 2 issues to address. One around statewide environmental as it relates to return on investment, and then also to really look at how we want to put the timeline together for the review process. So whether it's our neutral third party or ultimately our director's recommendation. So those are 2 take-homes that we still have to do in the permanent rule.
Excellent.
So with that, I would turn it back to you all.
Thank you for the quick turnaround. Is this reflective of the discussion that we had earlier today? And if so, do we have any changes or amendments? And if not, then I would welcome a motion, and I believe that we had some assistance from Bonnie, DOJ, in terms of the motion. So questions or comments first? All right, so I'd welcome a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the temporary rules for Connect Oregon program and approve the justification of temporary rules for adoption.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, next we have item M, request approval to amend the Oregon Administrative Rule as noted, locations of interstate speed limit for trucks, and receive a briefing on the 2017 Oregon Interstate Highway Truck Speed Limit Engineering Investigation. And do we have, I know we have Representative Huffman. Great to see you. Thank you for your leadership and for your work. If anyone wants to provide comment on this particular item, I'm happy to open the floor as soon as we are finished with this presentation. So please just let me know. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator for ODOT. Here with me is Doug Bish. Doug is the one that has been running this process. He is the traffic services engineer for us, a licensed engineer with a lot of experience in this area. I'm just going to give you a little background, then turn it over to him. So when we set speed limits in this state, we do it just about kind of on a daily basis. We do engineering studies, gather that data, run it through our process, and make the appropriate speed adjustment. There is specific authority, though, on the interstate that falls to the commission, and that's why we're here today for that. The third way that speeds have been adjusted, and recently in the 15 and 16 legislative session, there was adjustments to speeds that were made in statute. Leading up to the 17 session, Representative Huffman and I believe others also were proposing, or at least considering, legislation that would be, again, adjusting speed limits on the interstate. We talked to Representative Huffman and others and asked if we could run it through our normal process, gather some data, and kind of let the process run through and let that fall where it falls as far as the process. And so we've done that, and that's been almost a year now that we've been in this process. A lot of data and a lot of public input have gone into this, and Doug will walk you through all that. So just before Doug takes over, just from my perspective as I look at this, and maybe a couple things for you to pay attention to as you listen to Doug talk. One of the theories that we have in traffic engineering is a uniform speed, and that's part of how we set speed limits, was keeping traffic moving together. And in theory and in practice, that's a safer environment if everyone's traveling the same speeds. And so when we talk about this differential between trucks and cars, that's a factor. The other obvious one is anytime we raise speeds, that has an impact on safety and speeds involved in crashes. So you've got a couple variables there that I think to pay attention to as you hear the data and the process that we've gone through. So, Doug.
Thank you. How do you get? There you go. Chair Baney. Doug Bish, Traffic Services Engineer for ODOT. Can we, is that the slide? Yep, sorry. Yes, okay, thank you. So the process for setting speed limits on the interstate is outlined in Oregon Administrative Rule. The rule specifies that we do an investigation of the conditions. We produce an issues report, and we take public comments. As Paul discussed, we initiated this process last October. We had our advisory committee, Speed Zone Review Panel, held their first meeting in November. We set up a website to collect comments and provide information to the public. We engaged Portland State University to complete the study of the issues. In March, we held 3 public meetings around the state, one in Salem, Hood River, and Medford. We completed the investigation and the issues report and collected all the comments in May. We had our Speed Zone Review Panel review all that data and met in June. They made a recommendation to forward to this group, and we also, ODOT submitted rule changes to the Secretary of State, filed that in the Oregon Bulletin, and for public review. So our engineering investigation is one component of what we do for speed changes. It includes speeds like 85th percentile and average speeds, crashes, numbers, and rates, what the roadway characteristics are, curves, lanes, shoulders, what the traffic is, how many cars are on that road, how many trucks, what percentage of trucks, if there's any inclement weather in that. We also collect comments from our emergency medical services and law enforcement.
I have a question. What's the ADT acronym?
I'm sorry. That's the traffic volume. It's just average daily traffic.
Okay, guys.
I'm sorry. We have a lot of acronyms. The investigations were determined based on segments, and we tried to keep the segments as long as possible for consistency of speeds, but the segments are like segments of characteristics of the roadway. We just looked at those sections that were 65-55. So those segments south of Portland, the Troutdale to the Dalles, and a section of I-205. We ended up with 16 sections investigating. And we did not investigate any of those urban sections like in Salem or Eugene where it's set lower than 65. So Speed Zone Review Panel plays an important part in our process. Like I said, they're our advisory committee for establishing speeds in Oregon. They have representatives from the Oregon State Police, from the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee. We have a city rep, county representative, and an ODOT representative, so there's 5 panel members. The Speed Zone Review Panel recommended that we produce an issues report for this study. We had a similar report done in 2004 when we studied the speeds back in 2004. So they were updating that report, and that was Portland State who did that. They looked at things like car-truck differential speeds, crash frequency associated with speed increases, those types of things. And the Speed Zone Review Panel, after we collected all the data and produced the report and got all the public comments together, were the ones that made the recommendation to your group. So a little bit of data here. This is the vehicle speeds, and the 85th percentile speed. It's defined as the speed at which cars are traveling at or below 85% of the cars are traveling. I didn't say that very well, but sometimes how I say it, in other words, that's the speed at which 15% are going faster than that. So it's just a statistical speed and average speed. And as you can see in this, the truck speeds, the 85th and the average speeds are above the posted speed for trucks. You can see that down in the southern Oregon, at the left-hand side of the graph, there's some speed impacts due to the terrain, so that you have some lower speeds down at that end. So this is a graph of the crash rates for all the sections. I've indicated which sections are suburban, the rest are rural, so the suburban ones have the little arrow. For the most part, all the crash rates are lower than the average crash rate for the state for similar interstates, except for, you'll see that from Hood River to the Dalles, there's a spike in crashes there. So we looked at that, and that's due to an exceptional winter event that there's quite a few snow and ice crashes in 2014. If you were to take out 2014 and just average 2012 and 2013, it'd be below average. Also, I'll note that Roseburg is just about to the cusp of being over the average rate, and we'll talk about Roseburg a little bit more. So we looked at the fatal and serious injury rate, and it's about twice what average rate for fatal and serious injuries are. Injuries are classified as serious, moderate, and possible. So there's A, B, and C. So serious is A. That's where you'd go to the hospital. You couldn't continue driving. Moderate, maybe you can get back in your car, maybe you have a scratch or worse, but you can continue doing what you're doing. And a possible is where, oh, my neck hurts, but there's no indication of anything. So this next slide shows truck crashes versus the percent of truck volumes. The interesting thing about this slide is that the percent of truck volumes is higher than the percent of truck crashes, so that truck crashes are underrepresented. When I went through and I averaged all the sections, the average percent of trucks is 26% on our interstates. So it's 1 in 4 vehicles are trucks. But they only account for 16% of the crashes. And not only that, research has shown that when a truck-car crash does occur, that the cars themselves are responsible 3 out of the 4 times for that truck crash. So Portland State did our update of our issues report. They found on this map, you'll see a little red asterisk by all the states that have a differential speed. That's where the speed between the trucks and the cars are different. There's only 7 states that have that. For Oregon, that means all of our neighboring states have a differential speed except Nevada. The next bullet talks about increasing the posted speed will increase the travel speeds. I think everybody realizes that's fairly intuitive. The part that isn't intuitive is usually a 5 mile an hour increase in speed translates to like a 2 or 3 mile an hour increase in travel speeds. Raising speeds will increase crashes. There's still no definitive research that says that differential speeds are better than uniform or that uniform are better than differential. The research points to higher variances are associated with crashes, increased crashes. So the more variance in traffic speeds that you have between the vehicles traveling, that increases crashes. If you could reduce that, that would decrease crashes. Also, at this point, I'll kind of summarize the public comments for you too. We had 3 public meetings. We had 13 people testify. By email, we received 125 comments. They were fairly evenly split between opposing and supporting. The comments received supporting were cited improved safety from the decreased variability of speeds. And quite a few of those that were supporting it really wanted us to do away with the differential altogether. The comments opposed were predominantly concerned about safety. Another theme that I saw in there was the lack of enforcement for truck speeds. So they're concerned that trucks weren't being cited for exceeding the posted speeds. So we'll move to the recommendations, ODOT's recommendations and the Speed Zone Review Panel's recommendations that all interstate truck speeds in the investigated sections be posted at 60 miles an hour, with the exception of the Roseburg section. The Roseburg section I characterize as a blossoming crash problem, probably due to the close spaced intersections and because there's a lot of traffic within Roseburg that uses the interstate to get back and forth within the city. And we're recommending that Roseburg be posted at 60 miles an hour, reduced to 60 miles an hour for cars, and retain the 55 mile an hour for trucks. And that's the end of my presentation.
A quick question in terms of the public comment on the particular piece around Roseburg. Did you seem to have a lot of feedback on that adjustment, or was it really more kind of peppered within the rest of the comments?
Actually, Chair Boehne, what happened was the Roseburg didn't come up until after we had had our public meetings, because we hadn't finalized all of our data. We were just presenting the idea of the truck speeds, so it really never surfaced in the comments until just recently when we publicized this commission meeting. We had just a few people, a couple that supported, a couple that opposed.
Please.
Madam Chair, I think this move makes a lot of sense and we ought to adopt it. It's even in heavy traffic, you see passenger cars getting stacked up in a right lane behind trucks and they can't get over, and I think just equalizing the speed actually, I think, just does a lot to deal with the flow, and I think it's a good move. You guys have done your homework, studied it, and let's do it.
Great. Please.
Well, I agree that lowering the speed variability is a good idea. Personally, I think this is a bad idea, and I think what you're doing in Roseburg is the right way to go. Lower the car speed limit to bring that variability down, and we'll be a safer state if we were to do that. But I do respect that we've gone through a pretty deliberative process here. And I know what the legislature wants. So I won't oppose this, but I guess I do want to go on record as saying I think what you've done in what you're proposing in Roseburg is the better way to go for everybody.
Please, Commissioner Brown.
With that in mind, just to add to what Commissioner Lohman's saying, is there a way that a year from now we look at this and see how our crash rates have changed and make sure that we aren't doing something that we don't want to undo and come back to us and let us know?
Yes, it's part of the rule process, and it's written into the rule that we will evaluate it for 3 years.
And as a reminder, we did reduce the speed. I know that in my area, we had reduced in Central Oregon, I think it was 97 around was that Terrebonne Mattress area, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yes, we have temporary, Chair Beatty, we have temporary speed zones out there on US 97. It's not a permanent reduction. We're still studying those.
Great. But I think it shows that we are not, that we are flexible in making sure that we are balancing that safety piece with also the recommendations.
Chair Benny,
and
I
the
just
rule.
point out, though,
Please.
that in this case, there's actually a rule that requires us to do it. In that case,
Oh, yes.
the case that you're citing was a legislatively directed speed increase that we went back and looked at later. This would be actually in rule that we're required to do it.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep.
But Paul, you're not doing it just because of the rule.
It sure seems that the research also is showing that it might
I'm
make
just saying,
sense.
please come back
Okay.
to us on an
Yeah, we
annual
will.
basis
Yeah,
and let
yeah.
us know what the
Yeah, I was
speed
just
changes.
clarifying, I think the different way I started out, there's different processes we do this. And the legislative process is different than what we're doing here with the administrative rule process and the commission's specific authority, and just making that distinction is all I was trying to do.
Do you want to come back and talk to
Yeah.
us?
If I may, Doug, I apologize if I missed this, but how do we communicate this out? And not so much, I mean, we have professionals we work with the Trucking Association. They'll certainly get this information out to their members, but maybe more importantly, the Roseburg conversation, because we're shifting speeds both for auto and truck as well. What's communication with law enforcement? Tell me if indeed the commission chooses to move in this direction. How do we communicate this out and maybe just target that Roseburg section?
So we collaborate with Oregon State Police. They're on many of our groups, and they're on the Speed Zone Review Panel. We depend heavily on them to help us communicate to their staff and other law enforcement about that. I think we'll need to do some communications around, if this is approved, we'll need to do some communications and outreach to the public, why we're doing this and why the decision was made. And also we can include the fact that we're going to go back and look at it again after every year.
Sounds like a yes. Okay, I'd welcome a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve an amendment to the Oregon Administrative Rule 734-020-0011, dealing with the locations of interstate speed limits for trucks.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we,
Okay, one reluctant aye.
do we need
And
to also accept the study that was done?
We are receiving a briefing. I don't know that it's an actual report, though, but
Okay.
I think we have it covered. So the motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, Doug. Nice to see you. All right. We didn't, I didn't ask if there were any other comments. I'm sure that Representative Huffman, do you have anything that you'd like us to know? Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your service. All right, next we have the request to approve the Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank loan for Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon LLC. So, Mr. Winchheimer, shall I turn it to you? Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Beatty, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Ryan Winchheimer. I'm the ODOT Region 1 manager. And today, the region's role in the OTIP process is really limited to gathering information and providing project review. while the OTIB staff that you're going to be hearing from in a few minutes is responsible for evaluating and providing information regarding the financial reviews. From the region perspective, I can say with confidence that this is a good project that ODOT supports. The project is replacing a 90-foot culvert and adding turn lanes on Highway 35 to serve the Mount Hood Meadows new Twilight parking lot. The project has completed its NEPA reviews and is in the final stages of design. The new larger culvert is appropriately sized to accommodate projected runoff events and to protect the highway, and it's also designed to improve fish passage for threatened species in this significant tributary to the East Fork of the Hood River. ODOT has placed a requirement on Mount Hood Meadows to construct these turn lanes on Highway 35 as part of the new parking lot development. The lanes will improve safety at the intersection and are being designed to serve the anticipated demand associated with that new lot. At this point, I'd like to introduce Matthew Harris with the OTIB Bank Officer to explain the details of the loan proposal before you.
Thank you, Ryan. Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, I'm Matthew Harris. I'm the loan officer for the Oregon Transportation Infrastructure Bank, and I wanted to brief you on the financial component of this infrastructure bank loan. So as Ryan mentioned, we feel that it was a strong project in terms of in general for projects that we receive. It checks all the boxes that we look for. It improves highway safety, it has environmental impacts positively, and it has a substantial federal component to it. So we like to seek out projects that have federal grant additions to it as well, so that we can bring some of those federal dollars back to the state. So in that respect, it's a solid project from our application standpoint. On the other hand, this is a private sector loan. The applicant is Mount Hood Meadows, LLC. We have done roughly 50 infrastructure bank loans in the 20-year history of the program, and only 2 have been private sector loans. And of those 2, both have provided unique challenges to the department on an ongoing basis. And so several years ago, my predecessor, our former infrastructure bank loan officer, came to the commission, and we rewrote the rules, administrative rules, to make it a more robust process to qualify these loans when they're a private sector project. And so Mount Hood Meadows actually does not meet several other criteria, namely that they do not have a large amount of current assets to their current liabilities, which I believe is probably to be expected for a business of this nature. And they had a rough year in the past 3, and that's a requirement that they make a profit after taxes per OAR 730.030.0100. So in that respect, they do not qualify for a loan without a waiver. I have analyzed their financial statements. We have discussed at length with the region and internally with financial services staff, and our Chief Financial Officer, Tracy Rubluski, is willing to grant a waiver for Mount Hood Meadows to qualify for infrastructure bank assistance should the commission approve a loan. Financial Services is not prepared to be either supportive or against approval of this loan. We are strictly neutral because we do have concerns based on the nature of the applicant. But I will say, if this was Hood River County that applied for the loan, it would be essentially a slam dunk for us. And because this loan is over $1 million, it is up to the commission to determine whether or not to grant this approval for assistance. Typically with a city or county, we are able to, per ORS 367, to intercept gas tax funds to those municipalities, which makes our loans quite secure if we are loaning to a city or a county, because most every city or county that's applied to our program has enough gas tax to cover that. Mount Hood Meadows so far has offered essentially their revenues, and the revenues from our perspective are robust enough to cover debt service. But in the past with other private sector entities, the 2 loans that we have required additional collateral in the form of liens on both property and equipment. So those discussions, we would have those discussions with Mount Hood Meadows should a loan be approved. And so outside of that,
So it's your testimony today that you, having looked at the pro forma, that it would be able to cover the debt service, which it appears to be semi-annually at the $126
Correct.
almost 127,000.
Chair Bainey, yes, that is a estimate based on interest rates at the time. What we do is, should the commission approve a loan, we would look at what bond ratings would be at a lower rated credit and apply that rate to the loan for Mount Hood Meadows. And so the rate, or the payment amount may increase or decrease depending on what the final rate is set at, I guess you could say.
Unless if there were a default on the loan, then we would go to Mount Hood Meadows LLC, or we would go to, that's the first course, and then it would go, okay, very good.
Correct,
All
yes.
right, just verifying, making sure.
Yes, and
Please.
You said the collateral identified as the real estate?
We have not identified specific collateral for this loan yet. Preliminary discussions with Mount Hood Meadows, they have offered essentially their revenue streams. We haven't had explicit discussions on very specific collateral.
Free season passes.
Please.
But if I understood you, the revenue stream in the last 3 years hasn't been enough to cover their expenses.
Commissioner Lohman, the revenue stream in 1 year would be insufficient. They had a rough year, and part of our requirement is that they make a profit after taxes within the past, I believe, 3 years. So I don't want to speak specifically to the financial statements as provided because Mount Hood Meadows has provided those in confidence to the department. However, on average, and Mr. Drake has been very forthcoming about providing additional financial information to us as we've requested, that we feel in financial services that their revenue stream on the whole should be sufficient to cover any infrastructure bank assistance. So we feel confident enough, given that we feel very strongly about our fiduciary responsibility to the highway fund, that we are confident enough that we'll grant the waiver. However, like I mentioned, we have had challenges with past private sector loans, so we do not want to come out explicitly in support of the loan.
I appreciate that. I don't think that past private sector loans are indicative of how this one would go. This is a unique operator. It's a facility that I have enjoyed using my entire life since I was literally 5 years old, learning to ski there. So and I go up there regularly, and I've been caught in traffic jams on the roads and so I think they are investing in ways that will help alleviate this, and in my view would probably improve their profitability if we were to go forward with this. And it is a well-run facility. I think it is an invested and committed family and operator, and I think I just don't think we can look at other entities with the same light, and I'm fully supportive of us moving forward on this.
I agree with your comment about other entities, that they shouldn't be tarred with that other people's problems. And I don't want to get into their finances. I compare it sort of to what we see down in Ashland, where they had 2 horrible years because of no snow. This year they did pretty well. But if we have 2 more horrible years, I don't know if it'll survive. And I'm concerned about, if we have a bad snow year this year. And I guess partly my question, without wanting to get into the details of their finances, was this a good year or was this a bad year? This should have been a good year. And if it wasn't, then that makes me wonder. The other issue of concern to me is that we talked about the possibility of some additional collateral of some, or security of some form, but we don't know what that is yet. And it makes me want to then say, what if we didn't approve this today, but had that discussion about additional security before we made a decision? I don't know whether that's feasible or not, but this does make me a little nervous. Can you address that, the question of additional security, when we can get that kind of information?
Sure, Commissioner. I will say it wasn't necessarily the last year that they failed to meet our criteria. I was just trying to be as general as possible, and I can let Mr. Drake speak to the financials as he feels comfortable. I'm not sure on their time frame. They are owed, or they owe a payment, or I guess I don't want to say it. They have to pitch in a small component of their match piece for the federal grant. I believe beginning at this month, although we would reimburse that whenever the loan was approved. So from our perspective, we don't have any concerns at ODOT with pushing this to say the next month or however long it would take to determine what the collateral should be for the loan. And we can have those discussions, essentially right after this hearing. So outside of that, I could let Mr. Drake comment if he has any additional
Well, I
feedback.
appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Go
Matthew
ahead.
Drake, Chairman and CEO of Mountain Meadows.
Thank you. Right.
You're good.
Good.
Now the floor is yours, please. Thank you for joining us.
Matthew Drake, Chairman and CEO of Mountain Meadows. So I'm prepared to answer pretty much any question you have, financially related or otherwise, because I've spent my life with this company. So let's talk a little bit about fiscal year 2015, and we'll talk a little bit about the ski business in general and specifically related to our company. So many companies, in fact, probably about 95% of the companies in North America that are in this business operate in a fiscal year end that ends June 30, but the tax year end is Dec 31. So in the calendar year in 2015, we showed a minor negative net income of $156,000. That was for the fiscal year end, but for the tax year end, we actually had positive net income. So when you really look at it from a credit perspective, because of the cash flow nature of our business and the reporting time frames, we really have not had a negative year. So this is our 50th year anniversary this year. We're one of 3 resorts left in the United States that is still owned by the same kind of crazy folks. And in our 50-year history, well, I think this is going to be a good year coming up. We've never really had a negative year. We've never failed a debt payment. We've been a customer of the Wells Fargo Bank, formerly First Interstate Bank here in Oregon, for 47